Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are happy to be here with you. This is Blogging Warfare. I am Carolyn Capern, and very happy to be back with my friends Robert Ryan and Thomas Hanna, bloggers in crime, and we are going to dive right into our topic of the day because the tools of the trade is a topic that we could probably go off on for hours. There are just so many out there. It's actually very confusing for a lot of bloggers because there's just almost an overwhelming array of choices no matter what area you're looking at for tools of the trade. So I'll let the guys say a quick hello and then we'll jump right in. Rob, how are things over there in sunny Spain?
As you can see by my, I'm getting closer towards my long john. Sunny Spain isn't as sunny as it used to be. But with that said, it's still a lot nicer than Ireland is, so I'm very happy to be still in Spain, or what was sunny Spain. But yeah, and it's good to be here as well, to have lovely Carolyn and the lovely Thomas with us. It's been a while since this, mighty trio have been reunited to give some great content to our ever-expanding global audience, and we hope we will give you some of that great content today.
Glad to see you, Rob. And Thomas, right down the road, how's it going for you? How's your Thanksgiving?
My Thanksgiving was great. And did you catch that, Carolyn? I am lovely.
You are. We always knew it.
I am a lovely individual. No, I am doing great. I'm glad to be back. Just got back into town actually Tuesday night. I was in Arizona for a week. Got to meet some great folks out there. And then I was in California for a little while after that. And now I am finally back here in Florida, and I was greeted by the frigid tundra of the north that is making its way into our sunny state, and I find that unacceptable. But I'm surviving. Glad to be back here on the show. Looking forward to this topic.
It is getting a little rough with the temperatures down here, but we'll persevere and we'll survive. So, first item on the agenda today is to talk a little bit about the toolbox that holds all your tools of the trade. Everything for a blogger. Everything starts with your website. We've said that before on the show, and we'll probably say it over and over again because it's just absolutely the truth. So, Rob, I think what we were discussing is that for a lot of people, the initial choice of where to start your website comes down to, of course, the big boys, WordPress versus Blogger, and then also simpler, cheaper website options like Squarespace and similar sites. So what are your thoughts on the choice to be made there?
Well, as most people know, I'm a WordPress developer, but even with that, I'll still try to set aside my bias. And with my bias well and truly set aside, I think people should start on WordPress. Reason being, if you're going to go the Blogger route, then Google own your stuff as opposed to you. If you do go the Blogger route, eventually, 95% of the time, if people kind of outgrow the Blogger skin, they want to move on to something bigger. And that something bigger tends to be WordPress. So kind of my take on it is why not, get it right from the start, put the solid foundations in place so that all you have to do is focus on actually blogging and not have to worry about a headache of having to move all your content over, change all your links, etc., etc., etc. So my take on it is WordPress is probably the easiest one, the most user-friendly platforms for people to use, but coupled with that, it's extremely powerful. Google likes the way the databases play with each other from an SEO point of view. The code is generally clean. There's a multitude of different themes and skins that you can get. Some of them are free, although I'd only recommend that you use premium or bespoke. But even with that, Blogger is beaten hands down for me. Bias set aside.
Thomas, what do you think?
I started briefly, when I first started blogging, briefly with Blogger. Started looking at how it worked, researching the other ones, and then went through the process of transitioning from Blogger to WordPress. I also agree with WordPress. And that transition from Blogger to WordPress was a pain in the butt. So starting with WordPress, I think, is better. Now, there are some times that Blogger might be a better choice for you, particularly if you are very specifically wanting to remain small. But if you're looking at growing, WordPress is going to be much more robust. I did want to comment, though, because I run into this a lot, people that are getting into blogging, is that there's a difference between WordPress.com and the WordPress framework, which is usually held on WordPress.org, but that's used on self-hosted sites. WordPress.com is the free version. You go to WordPress.com, you put in your stuff, you get a free site. There, it's got some great stuff. It's a good entryway. It also has some limitations with it. And most notably, it limits your like in their terms of use, you're limited in your ability to market. So even I had a conversation with somebody the other day who had a friend who had published a book and created a blog on WordPress.com that kind of supported that book that she had published. And because a lot of her articles were about the book or things to do that, and she had a link to the book in the sidebar, WordPress.com actually shut her site down because it was viewed as a marketing site. So there are some of those limitations. If you're wanting to just build an audience in your industry, it's a good starting place there, but you'll eventually probably want to move to a self-hosted one, which is WordPress.org. So you need to know those differences. But even there, the transition from WordPress.com to a self-hosted one is a lot simpler, and WordPress actually has some things in place to help make that transition easier for you.
That's true.
Out there.
No, that's a really good point. I think a lot of people do wind up getting confused about that. I know. I mean, I certainly. I started on Blogger too, and I was there for quite a while. But that site has since gone the way of the dodo, and I'm very happily ensconced in WordPress myself now. So I think we're all three definitely WordPress junkies here. But there's certainly lots of advantages to Blogger, and perhaps we'll, in the interest of fairness, we'll have to track down some people who use Blogger to perhaps its fullest potential and do our best to combat it out and discuss the ins and outs of that.
Want this to be a fair debate, huh?
Yes, in the interest of full full spectrum opinions. So, well, since we are all pretty much in agreement on that one, it seems like, let's go on and talk a little bit more about some of the things that you want to put on your blog once you've created it. We're going to come back to WordPress plugins at the end of the show, but for now, let's talk about idea generation and how you come up with your content. And I think this one really does depend on what you write about, because different types of bloggers will approach it in their inspiration and their idea generation in different types of ways. For example, if you try to newsjack, if you try to follow the news and comment on it regularly, then you'll want to be following different sources than someone who is creating, doing marketing or doing other, creating food, for example, where you're doing different types of tasks. So, Thomas, where do you get a lot of your research or get a lot of your ideas?
Well, most of mine now, keep in mind the target that I write for is about, it's a how-to thing. How do you develop an audience? How do you do these things? What are the questions that people want to know and how to get answers? So my initial search for ideas and during that research, I like to use things. I'll use Quora. Quora is a great place so you'll see people asking questions about stuff. Yahoo Answers. And one of the neat things with some of those tools, some of those locations, is you can begin to identify trends. If you see something that's coming up a lot, then you know, okay, hold on, there's something going on about this. This is something people want answers to, and you can begin dealing with that. Probably the most powerful one, though, that has always had the greatest response from me, that has the greatest reaction to it, is for me to actually ask the community of readers that I have. So those people that are on my email list, I'll sometimes ask them in one of the emails that they get out. I'll have a comment on there that says, what are some questions that you have? Let me know. I'd love to tackle some of those. I have sort of an insider community that is folks that are part of my email group that choose to want to be a part of that community as well. And I have an area on there where they can ask questions. In fact, the most shared article on my site began with me asking them, what do you want to know about? And that was the one on time management. So those sort of communication mediums for me have proven the most helpful. I know that you have some other ones that I'm intentionally not stepping on, Carolyn, because I know that you have some great ones as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand that right back to you.
Sure. Well, I mean, my my usual thoughts are essentially essentially an extension of yours. You know, you do a direct form of social listening. You have a group of people and you ask them, and I think that's great. I actually do the same thing a lot of the time. Often I'll take client ideas, client questions, and generalize them and then put them out as blog posts. Or by extension, I also take client complaints that I have and turn those into blog posts as well, sometimes on how to be a good creative client. Rob's laughing because he knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep, I do. Unfortunately, I do.
But I think, you know, other good ways to go are to actually go to Twitter or to Google Plus and start to search around and just see what people are talking about. You can pull questions even from other people's threads. And Nick has a good observation here. Nicholas Cardot's out in the audience, and he says Jason Weiser does that as well. He asks his new subscribers to reach out to him and let him know what questions they'd like to see answered or explored. It really is. It's a great idea. Yeah. And so generating ideas from other people is probably the most powerful way to go.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jason T. Weiser is like on point with that as well. He doesn't even play around. Like, you follow him on Google Plus. I don't even mean subscribe to his email and get an automated thing. You follow him on Google Plus. You tend to get a message from him or something that says, "Hey, thanks for following me. Do you have any questions that we'd like to tackle?" Or he also asks, "Who would you like to see interviewed in my show?" And so he actually, I don't know how he's on top of it that much, although I know he's like super organized, but not my gift. But yeah, he runs with that, and he's able to rock that as well. So that is a great person to point to, Nicholas. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Kind of piggybacking on what Carolyn said there, and like listening to clients, or for example, sometimes one thing I like to write blog posts about is if a lot of clients want you to do the same sort of thing, be it adding a mailing list or just some sort of integration. I often find that writing a resource that makes it easier for people to do it themselves, or for the kind of developers that are not too sure how to do it or whatever, by compiling something like that, that then becomes a good source of content. And then if you kind of leverage and double down on it by going to a useful tool called Ubersuggest. So what this is kind of like a Google scraping tool, and what we'll do is see what are the most frequently searched search terms for something. So say, for example, if you type in mailing list, it'll then give you a breakdown of mailing list integration for WordPress, our best mailing list integration for WordPress, and a whole kind of plethora of different search terms or keywords that people are actually looking for. And so you can use that to then inform your decision of kind of what street you want to take your article or content down. And so kind of just add a little bit of SEO goodness on top.
Definitely. I also think it's worth subscribing to lots of different blogs to be a part of the conversation.
Subscribe to my blog.
Yeah, it's part of being a good member of the blogging community, isn't it? Reading each other's blogs, keeping up with what each other does. When you start to meet other bloggers, you can develop a good conversation even in exchanging blog posts. Mm-hmm. Nick, actually, out in the audience this summer, I remember at least 3 blog posts around the issue of content yellow journalism. Ryan Hanley, I think, started it, and Jason responded, and Nick then responded, and all of the blog posts wound up being phenomenal and really sparking a good conversation. I know the same thing happened around content shock back when Mark Schaefer first put out that idea back earlier last year. So subscribing to other blogs, including blogs for higher level industry, like directly to the blog to Google, directly to the blog for LinkedIn, directly to the blog for Facebook, can help you to stay tuned in on whatever's relevant. And of course, I use those 3 because that's my industry. That's what I blog about. So, but you can take the extension to whatever industry is relevant to you. So let's move on a little and talk about multimedia.
Before we move on,
yes.
I wanted to make 2 points, because there's one there was a point that you had made in the green room, Carolyn, that I intentionally didn't step on, so I thought you were going there again. But you had talked about Google Alerts.
Oh, yes.
As a great thing to set up, and Google Alerts helps you to focus on topics. So if you're wanting to write about particular topics and you're wanting to sort of prepare on both on terms of research, but also look at where are the conversations taking place around the web. You can actually put keywords into Google Alerts, and Google will send you an email, and you can set it up different ways. You can either send it so that at the end of the day you get one email that just kind of details everywhere that's been talked about, or that you get it every time that key phrase shows up and is indexed by Google on the web. So that's really helpful. Another one that I also use is BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo allows you to go in and again put in the topics that you're looking at, and you can set the timeline on that. So you can say, you know, over the past 6 months or over the past 24 hours or however you want to look at that, and identify within those topic areas what things are getting the most shares, which helps you figure out, which helps you clue in on what are people like interested in? What are they sharing? What are they commenting on? What are they interested in? You got to check that a little bit sometimes, because it is possible to jack up your share rate just in general, and that will still show up as a higher share rate in BuzzSumo. So you want to make sure you look at the article, but that's also really, really helpful. And I had a question for you, Carolyn, and then we'll move on. I'm not meaning to jack this, but I know that you do a lot with clients that are less oriented on a business thing and more on a creative side. So like writers, people whose blogging is about promoting a book or something that they're writing. And when you're dealing with that type of a field, your idea generation is very different. So I'm wondering if there's any suggestions that you may have to people that are writers or are engaged in a more creative space than an analytical one. What do you use to help build some of those ideas and generate some of those?
Oh, that's a great question. I love it. And I just had a meeting with a writer client yesterday, so it's very timely. So it's definitely been on my mind, because it really is so much harder when you're trying to promote fiction in some ways, in terms of the writing space and other creative pursuits as well, because you have to take it and try to create parallels. So one thing I was talking about with my writer client yesterday was one part was journaling the process. People love the behind-the-scenes look. They love to, the creative process is a mystery to so many people, including creatives, that we just love when people have a sense of their own process. So spending some time talking about that is a good idea. Also, using a blog, I think, to create bonus content and release bonus content is another good way to go. Like with this client, I was talking about actually releasing a serial novella over the coming months. She's already been writing it, and she can do it in just small parts, release it, like that's how most of Dickens's books were released back in the day, in serial form in newspapers. So you can essentially take the same principle and apply it to blogging and release shorter burst forms of content to your audience to essentially create a kind of bonus extra audience sense. You can do the same thing with the newsletter to be quite effective. But she doesn't have a newsletter list yet, so we're working on that with her.
I know a blog post you should read.
Yes. So those would be my two of my thoughts for now. But really, I think it's about thinking laterally in terms of the content, and either going a little deeper into your process or creating extra things that would make people feel more a part of the world that you create.
Also, on that as well, one thing would be kind of to merge the fiction with kind of the present day fact. So like what I mean by that is, say for example, Miley Cyrus, she's all over the news. How can you somehow or other weave what you do onto what Miley Cyrus does? Maybe it's a horribly juxtaposed thing, maybe it's something comical or satirical or whatever, but use kind of what's in pop culture as some kind of hook to get people's interest. Because like you said, if something is kind of way out there in the creative sphere or whatever, it might not be too accessible to people, or they may not know that they're actually interested in it. But if you give them, bait the lure, and then you get them at the home base.
I think that's true. Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the pretty pictures. Seems like every blog needs them. You need the visual appeal to pull people into your site to make it a little bit better of an experience overall. People love pictures. They relate to them much more strongly, both in shares on social media and in actually absorbing a blog post. So Thomas, your blogphoto.tv, it's right in your name. Tell us about what you use.
Well, yeah, it was a big change for me when I shifted from just writing content. This was a few years ago, to really focusing on the aesthetic of the delivery, which is really what the images are. They communicate in a different medium which you are going to unpack in your article, so they're absolutely essential. But the great news is they don't have to be super complex. You don't have to be a genius designer or anything else. I certainly am not. And there are some tools that help you with that. My favorite is Canva. PicMonkey also works really well. A lot of people use that. I use Canva for probably 90% of the images that you see on my site with the blog articles. And part of that is that I really like. I'll get an idea for the feel that I want to communicate, and I will develop a template in Canva, and then I will just edit that template and update it for whatever I want. So some key things with that. Canva, like I said, that's my main tool. They have a lot of different fonts that you can choose, but the simpler the better, and the simpler your visuals are, the easier it is to drive home your point. So identify one or two fonts that you are consistent with. Identify the logo that you're going to use can be consistent with that, and identify the type of feel that you want and be fairly consistent with that. So if you're doing those things, you at least have a good foundation, and then as you build, you can begin experimenting and looking at some other design things. But Canva really simplifies that and provides you with some examples of ways that things are laid out in professional designs, so you can actually kind of take some of those ideas and then build off of them for what you're wanting to do.
That's great advice. And Rob, you have a bit of a different design strategy, as it were. Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. Well, I suppose I'm fortunate enough to be pretty close to a graphic designer. You might have heard me reference her before, but Elena Montes Casado is the graphic designer I work with, and she's been in charge of all my graphics, branding, logo, you name it, anything I've done that looks good, she has done it basically. And as a result of that, I think I've been fortunate in having a little bit of kind of continuity across all social media platforms and pretty much in every blog post, everything that I put out, there is this kind of standardized look and feel to it, which helps with just the perception and the recognition of, well, this is another post from robertryan.ie, check it out now. And again, the point I want to make here is that by forming a relationship with a graphic designer who, you know, on a weekly or a daily basis or has one unique graphics, you can really develop a decent workflow whereby you understand each other. And this can, you know, lead to you receiving high quality graphics at a price or a rate that isn't, you know, bank breaking basically. And I think there are options like Fiverr, which isn't particularly bad, but if you're looking for consistency, you may not get that with Fiverr because you could have a different designer each time. So I would say try find a graphic designer who you can form a long-term relationship with, and that could yield better results in the long term.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, not every blogger has design skills. They just don't, and that's okay. It's not a prerequisite for being a blogger. Really, you know, the words are incredibly important still. But, you know, you do get to a point where it's more worth making the effort to develop a good relationship with someone that you can trust to handle your design, much like Rob has. And you know, eventually you just get to the point where you can just have an image that's consistently high quality, and that makes a big difference in the overall professionalism of your blog. I know that, you know, me personally, I use Photoshop for the most part, but I rely on websites like Thomas's to provide a lot of the graphics copyright free that I would otherwise be having to pay for. So it's a very nice thing to find services like he offers in his newsletter, and then to look at others like Morgfile I look at, and a handful of others that I'll make sure we include links for in the blog post that will undoubtedly be following this show.
In about 24 hours. 24 hours.
Within 27 seconds.
Yeah.
We'll have that typed up and sent out to all of you.
And Elena have a lovely graphic for it too.
Exactly. Well, we've got a very special guest to join us for the last segment of the show. He's been in the comments lurking around for the rest of it. Mr. Nicholas Cardot, why don't you unmute yourself and say hello?
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been really fun watching so far. Really enjoyed this.
Glad to have you here. It's been a while since I've seen you. You're looking a little ghostlier than usual today.
It's just the lighting. Just the lighting.
He has that glow about him.
Yes.
I think he's not self-conscious anyway, right?
So, Nick, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our favorite WordPress plugins. And before we get to the one that you're going to introduce to our wonderful audience today, what are some of the other standards that you like to use within WordPress?
First off, if you're doing a blog, it's because you have content that you want to get out there to your audience, so you don't want to become an expert at every little detail of web design. So get some of this stuff automated for you. Get a good SEO plugin like Yoast SEO or All-in-One SEO, and they have on-page grading for your SEO, stuff like that. So they're doing 90% of the work for you. If you have a good plugin, get a good caching plugin, either W3 Total Cache or WP Super Cache, depending on the type of server you're on, so that you don't have to worry about all the nitty-gritty of page speed and things like that. Of course, if you want to learn more about those things, do it, dive in there and become more proficient at it. But if you just want to focus on the big picture, then get some of that stuff done for you. Those are the two biggest areas that you want to have a good plugin in place, your SEO and your site speed.
Definitely. Rob, what do you think?
No, I would agree, and just on the SEO, the plugin that I would favor over the ones that Nick has mentioned is the Yoast plugin. It's definitely one of the most powerful, easy to use, and Yoast, he covers all the bases basically. So I would say spend a bit of time in kind of really understanding how the Yoast plugin can work, or get in touch with somebody like me or Nick. But other plugins that I use, it was actually Justin Stout who mentioned it, or I came across in one of his posts a while back. But it's Revive Old Post, and that can be a useful enough plugin for kind of keeping the back catalog alive. Because what I've found, I've been blogging on my current site for a year and a half or so now. A lot of the posts from the back catalog, it's kind of like, they were good and they're still good, but they're just not being kind of pumped out into the social media stream as regularly as they could or should be. But this Revival post is a nice little way of it. Any post that's over 30 days old, or you can set the parameter there yourself, but any post that's say over 30 days old, it will pump it out on an hourly basis or whatever you want to.
One counterpoint that I would make to the Revival post is that you don't want to use that if you're writing time-sensitive information like news articles, because if you tweet something out today that's about a news event from 6 months ago, your audience is going to feel very disconnected to that, and they're going to feel like it's automated.
100%, and within the plugin, it's possible to say ignore this post, and ignore this post. So kind of bearing in mind what Nick has said just there, you should, if you're going to use it, make sure you're not putting something out, about a Christmas competition that you ran in 2008.
Yeah, and let me comment on that because I was actually about to make the same point that Nick makes. Now, one of the things that you can do with that, and that Revival Post allows you to do, is if you make sure that when you lay out the organization of your site, that you're, particularly with sites that have some evergreen content and some time-specific content, you can categorize those in ways so that you tell Revive Old Post to only revive things from these certain categories, and those categories only contain evergreen content. So then when that stuff goes out, now you do also want to make sure when we talk about evergreen content, depending on your niche, it's not just new stuff. So if you're talking about social media and SEO, you got to be aware that stuff changes a lot as well. So going back and updating things becomes important because you do want to keep that in, but you also want to be careful that you're not sharing stuff that has outdated information on it, because that's not just a matter that will let you feel disconnected from your audience, that will actually undermine your credibility. So just be aware of how your site is organized and what is going to be shared. But if you have it laid out that way and that evergreen stuff is there, that becomes incredibly helpful. And there's a lot of people that use that to great effect. I know Dustin Stout uses that plugin and uses it to great effect. So So we go. This is an exciting plugin. I didn't expect it to be this exciting, but I know we've got a response. Go ahead.
And I want to piggyback right off of that because you guys were talking earlier about ways to come up with content. One terrific way to come up with content is to take an old article that maybe it's about SEO, but something in it has changed now. So you go back and you update it with the new ways that things should be done. Well, that URL already has the inbound links and stuff, so now you're just reviving it, recycling it, and adding new ideas, new life into it, completely updating it. I don't agree with just taking an old post, changing the date on it, and publishing it. But if you update it and you put fresh ideas into it, that's a great way to have good content on your blog and to keep everything fresh and up to date.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And those kind of revivals are important. Sometimes you can make a post far better than it was before just by going back and updating it. I know I'm actually in the process of trying to do that about once a week on our site, at least spend an hour or so going back and going through to see what can be improved and enhanced a little bit. And as I learn more, my blog posts become better informed and they can start to cross-connect, and I can find new internal linking opportunities to new blog posts that I've created. And so you're right, it just enhances itself over and over again. In terms of other plugins I like personally, we don't use a whole lot in the sites that we build. Greg builds a lot of custom plugins, but I do still like using Contact 7 for contact forms because it's very easy to make it a very personal note. It doesn't have to be structured just with boxes. You can put enough text around it, and I think it's actually important to kind of make your contact form into a nice little note for people to fill in. It just makes it that much more personal to let people know that you can be in touch with them.
CF7, can't argue with that one. It's it's one of the most downloaded plugins of all time nearly. They're thereabouts at this stage. But just one other plugin I think that we spoke about in the green room, and maybe it's worth mentioning because it kind of ties a lot of different pieces together, is Triber. So Triber is a website, but it's also a community, it's also a plugin, it's also a decent way for bloggers to tap into other blogger networks. So I would say Triber is definitely on my useful plugin list anyway. Anybody else use Triber out there?
Not yet. I've been meaning to for ages.
Okay, so Triber is definitely well worth checking out.
I'm on Triber. I love Triber, and I know Nick is on Triber as well because I'm in one of his Triber communities.
I've dabbled in Triber. I set up that community, but I've really not dove into the deep end yet and really explored all the potential that it has to offer.
Yeah. Well, I would say for me, the activity that I get on Twitter, I would say that the vast majority of that is not actually driven by Twitter. It's actually driven by Triber and the community that has developed there. And the difference is that Triber is a great tool, but it's set up specifically to help you build communities with people who are writing in similar content, who are sharing similar content, and who you wind up entering into a collaborative relationship with. So you're sharing each other's content, you're engaging with each other, you're building relationships with others within your community, and it winds up becoming a network as opposed to Twitter is very easily a broadcasting medium because you're limited to 140 characters, and sometimes building that tribe becomes a little more difficult, and Triber helps with that. I know we're I'm going to hand it back over to Carolyn. Sorry.
Yes, no worries. No worries. This is a great discussion, and I think I'm thinking here that it might be worth scheduling a follow-up to this one where we talk mostly about building blogger communities and using social media as well for that. But for now, Nick, you have been learning plugins from the inside out lately, have you not? Tell us a bit about what you've been working on and what you're excited to release.
Yes, we just launched this week a new plugin that I've been developing for almost a year now. It's called Social Warfare. We call it your ultimate social sharing arsenal. And basically what happened was Dustin and Jason had some issues implementing their social media strategy the way that they wanted to. And we couldn't find any plugins on the market that would allow us to create these solutions we needed. For example, if you're on Pinterest, you would know that vertical images tend to get a lot more attention because of the way that their platform is laid out. But most blog images a lot of times are landscape. They're usually a little bit wider than they are tall. So what if what if you could get your pin button to share a modified version of that blog image, one that is designed specifically optimized for Pinterest, for example. So we created a plugin that does that. We also wanted it to look different from plugins that are out there now and have some very artful animations in it, but the key features are being able to put your optimized Pinterest images and descriptions, so you're controlling what your users are sharing for you. And you can create custom tweets so that when the user clicks on the tweet button, they're not just getting the title of the article, they're getting whatever you crafted. And the most powerful use of that, what we do is we go to twitter.com and we craft a tweet and we upload an image. And then we copy and paste that into the custom tweet section. So now when the users click the tweet button, they're not only tweeting a link to the article, but they're also tweeting out an image with it, which, if you're familiar with how images work on Twitter, they pop out a lot more because not a lot of tweets have images. And so, and also we cache all the share results as part of the WordPress post, so that it's, you know, doesn't slow down the site like nearly at all. I mean, our entire plugin, when loaded on the front end of the site, is like 8 or 9 kilobytes total. And so it's way faster than the native share buttons. And by caching these buttons and attaching them to the WordPress post, we can now sort posts by their popularity. And so I built a widget this week, and I added it to the plugin, where you can add this widget to your sidebar, or if you're a developer, you can go ahead and create a page where it sorts posts this way. And the sidebar will actually show your most popular posts, and you can choose, do I want all shares, or do I want Google Plus shares, or do I want Twitter shares? You can pick. And you can choose how many you want to show. So you can literally show your most popular post. There's lots of popular plugins out there. Most of them count by page views or by comments or something like that. But our popular post one measures your popularity by how many times it's been shared on social media, which I believe is a true measure of popularity of something.
Well, that's an incredibly exciting plugin, actually. That meets a whole lot of needs, probably all in one.
And
Thomas, you've been... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One final feature I forgot to mention is we have what I believe is the most intuitive click-to-tweet feature of any WordPress plugin. You click a button on the, you know what the kitchen sink is? It's that little toolbar above your editor. You click on a button in the kitchen sink, and this little pop-up comes up that says, what do you want the tweet to say? How do you want it to appear on the page? Because sometimes the quote might actually be more than 140 characters, and then you have a slightly shortened version of it to go out in the tweet. And again, you can add images in there. You can do whatever you want to just make a beautiful click-to-tweet, and then it creates the post, puts it right in your post for you.
I think one of the reasons why I wanted to get Nick on the show to our ever-expanding global audience is because this is a plugin that I use anyway. I think Thomas uses it. I've been fortunate enough to be using it, I think, since you had version 1 or in and around. I was in the beta testers, and I've had I loosely term it as the pleasure of using lots of different social sharing plugins in the past for my own site and for client sites, and a lot of them can be very Yankee. Some of them, they just don't work. They're very heavy load times, but this really is it's a gift. It's one of the best plugins I've found for social sharing, and the fact that with Nick at the helm, along with Dustin and Jason, it's going to continue to improve, because I think even in the last week alone, you've had 3-4 different updates or 3 version releases as you've been adding new things. So to see the plugin develop as fast as it has over the last year, with all the new kind of innovations that you're making now, I think it's positioning as one of the best social sharing plugins available at the moment. But give it another 6 months, and it will be the big daddy of them all, I reckon. So more for our listeners, get ahead of the pack.
Yeah, well, let me comment on it all, because I've kind of had the privilege of being like you of being sort of on the inside of this. So I've had this on Blog Photo TV since Blog Photo TV launched, and on my other sites since this plugin started coming out. And so let me just mention a couple of things that I particularly like on it that Nicholas didn't mention that I think are particularly impactful for this audience. First of all, it's a really aesthetic, it's a really beautiful bar that you can arrange where you want that to go, but not only does it load quick, it looks really nice, and you have design choices with it. So it's not just we're going to put this on here and you're kind of stuck with where it is and how it looks and all that. You have different design choices that you can lay out. You can choose which which social platforms you want to show and which ones you don't. It has a total button for all the social platforms there, and and instead of focusing on 50 million platforms, it focuses on the 5 major ones, which may sound counterintuitive, but if you look at the studies, that's the way you want it to be, because the more options you give your readers, the less likely they are to take action. So limiting that to the major ones that you want to focus on actually improves the type of activity that you get in that article. But here's the other thing that you see a lot of plugins really struggle with, that this one has nailed down, and that's the fact that Google Plus doesn't have an API, which means that in order to get the counts, like the share count, to show up on your page, you have to either use the share thing that Google Plus gives you for you to embed, which is really ugly, or you have to find some way to work around the fact that Google doesn't give you direct access to download those share counts. And so people have had to find ways to kind of bring those up and figure out what those are and then import those and put them into the plugin, which oftentimes creates a really weighty plugin in order to get that to work, or they just don't show the Google counts at all. This one not only loads super fast, it captures those Google shares and the plus ones and all that stuff, puts it right there on the sidebar, and it doesn't look any different. It fits right in with your theme and right in with the plugin. And like I said, you have options on how you can make that look to tie in with everything else. And you know I'm real big on aesthetics. I'm real big on Google Plus. Having something that works particularly well for that, not only is optimized for Twitter engagement, optimized for Pinterest engagement, I think is really powerful. And it's great social proof, because it doesn't just show here are some of the things, it also shows here are your total number of shares across all platforms that it gathers. So altogether, I loved this, and I haven't found anything else that is really comparable to it, which is why I've been using it for so long.
Well, bravo, Nick.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Make sure you're on the latest version, because yesterday I spent the day overhauling the way it works on responsive. So it's completely mobile friendly now too, way more so than it ever had been. So make sure you guys update to your most recent version.
Consider it done.
Awesome.
Well, excellent. Well, I think we've packed a lot of tools of the trade into our show today. And I think that a lot of people are going to be looking forward to this blog post, rounding up all of them. And we'll probably even throw a few bonus ones in there just for fun. Maybe Robin Thompson and I will talk about our top 5 or something like that. But for now, I think we will be signing off for the moment. Very grateful to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and hope that anyone who tuned in for the rebroadcast also found it useful. Hit up the comments, and fellas, tell us where we can find you. We'll start with Nick.
You can find me on Google Plus. Connect with me there, or if you want to check out the plugin, go to warfareplugins.com. And we do have a coupon code for all the listeners of Blogging Warfare. Simply put in Blogging Warfare with no space in there, just one word, Blogging Warfare, and you'll get 20% off your order if you do decide to give it a try. With that, I just want to say one last final caveat. We have a 100% love it guarantee. If you buy it and you don't love it for any reason, let us know and you get your money back.
I love
Wonderful.
that guarantee.
Yes. Rob, how about you?
Okay, so you can find me on Google Plus, obviously enough, or else you can find me at robertryan.ie. It's where I blog, and that's where I do my stuff online. So robertryan.ie or Google Plus.
Thomas.
I am the most awesome guy in the world.com. No, I am blogphoto.tv. You can find me there. You can also find me here on Google Plus. And if I haven't met you, if we haven't connected, please drop me a message on Google Plus. I'd love to get acquainted with you and get to know you.
And you can find me at ct-social.com. That's my company site with Greg Trujillo. Of course, connect with me on Google Plus as well. Twitter at Dover Bookworm. And for now, we will sign off and look forward to your questions and comments in the long run. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and have a great day.
See you in 2 weeks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.